Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Hello, welcome back everyone to the Maverick News channel. Breaking news out of Palm Springs, where investigators are now saying an explosion at a fertility clinic is the result of what they are calling an intentional action. Here's an image from this fertility clinic, and we have a little bit of video.
The explosion was so crazy, it blew out the glass of this liquor store. Look at this liquor store. Oh my God. All from this explosion, poor guy. Damn. This liquor store got from the explosion. Look at this, dude. Damn, crazy explosion. Glass and everything everywhere. The explosion was so crazy, it blew out.
Okay, so we are following this, and we have more which we will share with you when we come back on the other side, along with today's other top news stories. Stay with me.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV,
the entire world is watching.
On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
So we know one person has been killed in that explosion in Palm Springs. It heavily damaged that fertility clinic in the Tony, California city of Palm Springs, and it appears to have been intentional. That's the word tonight from authorities there. One person, as I say, found dead. FBI saying it is sending investigators, including bomb technicians, to the scene this evening. The police chief of Palm Springs has issued a statement, and he says the blast appears to be an intentional act of violence, and several businesses and even buildings in the adjacent area have been damaged. Some of them, as you've seen already, severely. And the act was being just investigated as a possible car explosion, but now the investigation seems to be taking on new layers. We have additional video here this evening, as I say, so let's share some of that with you now.
Was so crazy, it blew out the glass of this liquor store. Look at this liquor store.
And there's still images again. So this happened around 11 a.m. local time, Palm Springs. Residents at that time were being asked to avoid the area around North Indian Canyon Drive near East Takeva Drive. We've seen also images tonight of a burned out car in a parking lot behind the building that housed the fertility clinic's office space. The blast collapsed the building's roof. It blew out a wide debris field, blowing debris right across the sidewalk and 4 lanes of the street on the other side of the building. People in shock there as they've seen this, and what the motive behind this might be, not entirely sure. We have additional footage here now. So we'll continue to follow this. Again, we don't know what the motive behind it might be. Here's some additional footage again. New York Post using the word terrorism, saying that it's being investigated as a possible act of terrorism, but that is the only media outlet that I've seen using that word this evening so far. Although when you start seeing authorities say that it appears to be an intentional act, then of course that other word seems to creep into the conversation fairly quickly. More images here tonight.
Explosion.
So obviously authorities still on the scene this evening.
Oh, there. We're kicking us out of here. That's why the alarms are going off. There's windows shattered over there.
We also are told that the clinic was closed at the time of the blast. So, again, I can't say much more about it. A lot of speculation, some zeroing in on the recent announcement from Donald Trump that the government will help couples conceive through assistance with IVF treatments. And people suggesting might have something to do with that, but at this point, really, there's no definitive answer on what the motive behind this may have been. We don't have a name at this point either officially of who the victim was. And I am seeing other reports that I don't think are accurate regarding the number of casualties. We can only tell you that we've got confirmation here that one person tonight is dead in connection with this blast in Palm Springs. There may have, it looks like there were other people injured, maybe as many as 5, but only one fatality confirmed tonight. And the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, Federal Attorney General, saying that they have sent investigators to the scene. And we have some aerial footage here that I will share with you. Wow. Blew out the front and the back. And as you can see in the back area, massive amount of damage. The street level shots really do not give you the full scale of the destruction and the power of that blast. Also told that it appears there was only one car in the parking lot at the time. And you can see that the blast went straight through the building. Blew out the front. And this footage courtesy of Channel 7, ABC, Palm Springs. Okay, let's take a little break. We'll come back. We'll start digging into the other top news stories of the day right here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus program for your minds.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, I'm just dipping into the chat here. Hello, Jubilee, and the Kron, and Tinkerbell. Hello, and hello, Lindy. And hello, Norfa. Speculation in there as to what this might all be about, this blast tonight. And yes, I am well, Lindy. I hope you are well as well. I hope you are all well out there in Maverick Land. And Norfa, you're telling me to give Cosmo, the freedom dog, a scratch on his butt because all dogs love butt scratches. Well, yeah, I scratch his ears, I scratch his belly, and I scratch his hips. I draw the line right there. After that, he's on his own. And he's not shy about it, as dogs tend to not be too shy about such things, as I know you are all aware. But my assistance only goes, so far. What else do we have to share with you tonight? We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to talk about rising inflation, what Donald Trump is telling Walmart to do. With regard to that, we'll also talk about Mark Carney and his no-budget minority liberal government. And I'm going to give you a bit of an analysis on that, my perspective on why he has likely done this, why he's taking this approach, and why I don't entirely agree with the assertion that it's undemocratic or even tyrannical, as I've heard some people say. No, I wouldn't quite characterize it that way. I'm going to give you kind of a surprising, maybe surprising to some, analysis, and a lot of it goes back to my younger days, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and just getting into, I was still in, those are my college university days I'm referring to, and I'll explain a little later in the program. But in order to preface all of that, we should talk a little bit about these rising prices that we're seeing in grocery stores, groceries, Donald Trump's new favorite word. You may recall about 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that he loves that word, groceries. Strangest thing. He just focuses on the strangest of things. Donald Trump. He got fixated on that word for a day, made headlines with it, as though it was some new word that someone had just invented or that he had just discovered. I guess when you're that rich and you don't do your own grocery shopping, you can't really relate to the little people. Anyway, in Canada, as a result of all of this, tariff warring, we're seeing warnings from major retailers, including Loblaw, that prices are going to increase because inventory, which they've had on hand pre-tariff inventory, is now dwindling, and they are bringing in new inventory, which are now being hit with tariffs at the border. And as a result, you're beginning to see prices spike. Loblaw, of course, responding by putting big signage up to let people know what products are being tariffed. They're marking various products affected by the tariffs. And just that one grocery store alone, that one grocery store chain, says that they have right now about 1,000 items that they regularly stock that will be affected by these tariffs. And within the next couple of weeks, that number will rise to as many as 3,000 items. And over the next 2 months, you could see 6,000 items just in Loblaw grocery store chains rise in price as a result of tariffs. Now, we'll run a little bit of this piece from Global News.
Even though many Canadians have been furious with how much they've seen grocery prices rise in recent years, there is a renewed push to spend more, so long as the product is made in Canada.
The more money we can keep in Canada, the better it is.
In terms of the tariffs and everything, that we do need to kind of stand up as Canadians and show that we're not going to be bullied.
We have to support Canada, and I'm a proud Canadian.
Right now, I'd pay a whole lot more than that. I think Donald's such a crazy man.
A survey from Dalhousie University's Agri-Food Analytics Lab sampled 9,700 Canadians at the end of March and found that 3 in 5 are open to paying 5 to 10% more for Canadian-grown produce, dairy, or meat over American options. The poll also found that more than half of Canadians trust grocers to some extent. Analysts say that's a shift from even 6 months ago, when many were frustrated at Canada's large supermarkets over prices. But Dalhousie University's Sylvain Charlebois expects the Buy Canadian momentum to ride until there is a significant sticker shock.
So people will continue to buy Canadian until food inflation becomes a problem again. And that could happen within, I would say, a month or so.
Meantime, an Angus Reid poll found that more than 6 in 10 Canadians want the federal government to play hardball with the Trump administration and should not be bullied. That's an increase from late December, where half of Canadians felt the same way. The survey also found that 61% of respondents think Ottawa should continue to play tough with the U.S., even at the cost of the Canadian economy going into a recession.
Okay, so we're seeing all of this, and it's difficult for some people to understand, a lot of people to understand, because, of course, the average person doesn't get terribly focused on economics beyond your personal budget, what things cost at the store, what your income is personally, your personal budget. And so a lot of people just, don't really fully understand even what a tariff is or how it works. But of course, the prices that you're seeing rise at supermarkets in Canada will largely be prices that are being affected by tariffs imposed by our government on incoming products that contain inputs or are exclusively produced in the United States and are being imported into Canada. And the rate of inflation with regard to any particular item, how much the price increases, will depend on, I guess, U.S. content and whatever penalties or tariffs, if you will, have been applied by our government. So keep in mind that the price increase at the store is the result of the tariffs our government is placing on U.S. imports, and the prices increasing on the U.S. side are the result of the tariffs that the Trump administration is placing on their side of the border. So it's our government that results in the higher prices here. It's their government that results in the higher prices over there. It's essentially a form of taxation. And you might say, well, why would we do that? And it is because it's a strategic thing. The difference between what Trump is doing and what our government is doing is that our government's response has been more targeted and more strategic. And they're using not just tariffs, but also non-tariff tools, economic tools, such as export taxes as well, to make certain products more expensive going into the United States, and non-tariff barriers like regulations, restricting the flow of goods into Canada from the United States by imposing certain rules, content rules, safety rules, even packaging rules, things of that nature on products flowing this way. The reason our government is doing it in this fashion is because if we have critical industries that contribute a lot to our economy, such as the auto industry, and in order to exert pressure on the United States to try to get them to lift these sanctions, if you will, or tariffs on their side, which de-incentivizes or makes it too expensive for people on their side of the border to buy Canadian products, thereby putting pressure on, say, our auto plants and incentivizing automakers to shut our factories down here altogether and then just move production to the U.S. side. That's what the effect of a tariff could be. Our response then or Carney's response, and the Liberal government's response is to target specific key sectors of the U.S. economy and key states where they have a high percentage of, say, MAGA voters, and then target industries there, like Kentucky, and go after Kentucky bourbon, liquor products flowing into Canada. And by tariffing those products, it puts a big dent into the economy right there. As a result, the political leaders there and the people in those jurisdictions then apply pressure to the Trump administration and say, hey, wait a minute, we can't sell our products into Canada anymore. It's too expensive and people aren't buying them more. In the case of what the Ontario government has done, they've just taken U.S. liquor right off the shelves at the Liquor Control Board of Ontario stores. And that's another way of doing it without actually imposing, say, a tariff. They're just saying we're just not going to sell the product anymore. Now, doesn't make it illegal to buy it if you can buy it someplace else, but because Ontario regulates the sale of alcohol in the provincially controlled stores, they just don't put it on the shelves. The bottom line, though, is people are seeing rising prices on both sides of the border. And whose fault is it? Well, one guy started the war. Yes, both sides prior to this had tariffs in place. And if you go back to the previous Trump administration, the first Trump administration, Trump 1.0, he imposed tariffs on Canada even back then. There were tariffs. I believe it was 25% on steel and aluminum during his first administration. But even with those tariffs, our steel and aluminum industries, so efficient over here, we still survived that. Those industries survived. It still continued to export into the United States because they had various ways of competing, not the least of which is the energy that we produce over here to produce those products is less expensive than the energy they produce over on the U.S. side, and the technology being used in the factories over here is newer, it's better, it's more efficient, it's cleaner because it's driven by electricity and not the old coal-fired facilities, which over on the U.S. side, in some cases, I believe, are over 100 years old for their steel industry. So we've still been able to compete through it all. But this time around, it is different because he's imposing these sort of almost blanket tariffs across the board. Still some exceptions, though, exemptions for announced afterward. He backed down, trying to make it look like Canada's bending the knee. But in fact, it's Trump who has backtracked on a lot of what he has done. And then while announcing tariffs for the auto industry, if you actually went in and read the fine print on and the backgrounders on what the administration is doing, you're finding out that a lot of the auto industry is actually exempt under the terms of the current United States, Mexico, Canada trade agreement. Nevertheless, tariffs still remain in place on both sides. The trade war continues. Consumers are paying a high price on both sides, about to pay a much higher price. Expect, I would say, prices to increase 25% on many products. And here's an image of the big T for tariff on the sign at the Loblaw stores.
At Starbucks, we're proud to...
We'll get past this and we'll run a little bit of this report for you so you can get some perspective on what that big T on the sign means. Here we go.
Loblaw is introducing new signage to be more transparent about its pricing due to tariffs.
The symbol is supposed to help customers make informed choices down the grocery aisle. With more, we'll bring in Consumer Matters reporter Ann Drewa. Ann?
Thanks, Chris. Loblaw tells us is preparing to place the T symbol on certain goods as early as next week across all of its stores and online. The company says the T symbol will mean a product coming into Canada from the U.S. has had a tariff imposed that impacts its price. Ottawa has issued counter tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods like poultry, dairy, and fruits and vegetables impacted from the U.S. On a recent LinkedIn post, Loblaw CEO Per Banks said Canadians should be prepared to pay more for goods originating from the U.S. in the weeks ahead, and goes on to say it's simple. When customers see a T on the price tag, they know it has been directly sourced from the U.S. and impacted by tariffs. But some people, like food professor Sylvain Charlebois, says Loblaw's approach may be too simplistic.
So I think that what Loblaw is doing right now is preparing its customers for higher prices. But can you actually isolate that one factor, tariffs? Because right now I would argue that uncertainty related to tariffs is making things more expensive right now.
Yeah, see, that's a very valid point. It's the uncertainty that Trump has injected into the economy that is creating all kinds of chaos and resulting in rising prices as well. It's just devastating to efficiency. It's costing various industries, in some cases, billions of dollars. You've seen it even with the auto industry, where the auto companies don't really know what is going to happen in the future because he's changing his mind from literally sometimes 1 hour to the next. And even some of the stuff that Trump comes out with and announces with regard to his tariff war turns out to not actually be true. When you get the backgrounders, the background information, documents from the White House, and then you find out later that these tariffs that he says he's imposing, they're exemptions and holes, or this one's higher than that one, and the math that he's using doesn't add up. And then he flies off to the UK or to Japan or wherever, China, not China yet, but you may go there. And you end up seeing that what he announced doesn't end up happening. And well, he's saying that he's bringing in trillions of dollars in investment. The reality is, even though some companies are making announcements saying that they're planning on, expanding or building new facilities in the United States, we'll have to see if they even actually follow through with these investments. It seems like some of them may just be making the announcements or telling him what he wants to hear, knowing that within, now 3.5 years, the entire situation could change. In fact, they know it could change next month. And if you are, say, Jaguar in the UK and you're looking at maybe investing in a factory in the United States, are you really going to do that right now when you put billions of dollars into a facility if you're not sure what's going to happen in a month, 6 months, 2 years, even 4 years? Building a factory is a long-term investment. It takes years, and there's all kinds of stability. You're seeing also companies in auto plants in Canada announcing layoffs and pulling back production because it's eroding consumer confidence. People are not sure about what's going to happen. So that will no doubt be reflected in sales figures for vehicles, appliances. It's going to affect just consumer confidence and consumer sales right across the board. You're seeing the auto companies announce layoffs at plants too because they can't really predict what production levels they're going to need even a month from now, 2 months from now. Oshawa announcing big layoffs at their facility at General Motors, the General Motors plant there. But they have to, and again, I'm optimistic though, because we know that on the terms of their union contract, they have to give the union 6 months notice before those layoffs take effect. So what have they done? They've announced the layoffs. They announced them, a week ago? The federal government saying, we're on it, we're looking at it, we're concerned for the workers, but they haven't taken effect yet. They have to give 6 months notice. So they've announced the layoffs now because they don't know what the situation is going to be 6 months from now. But based on what we're seeing in these other countries, like the UK, where they just got this framework for a trade deal, where Trump really did backpedal on a lot of these tariffs. And it's not a full comprehensive trade deal. It's a framework for a trade deal with a few carve-outs in it and an agreement to talk more about more trade deals in specific sectors. That's really what it has come down to for the UK. I suspect we're going to see something like that unfold here in Canada. But until then, General Motors and other places will leave plans in place so that they can dial back production and lay off workers if they need to do that in order to make sure that they keep costs in line as much as they can because of the uncertainty in the economy. You can't plan for anything 6 months out or a year out if you don't know if there are any indications of what the economy is going to be like. And right now, it's completely up in the air. And the stock market is on a roller coaster ride with people who make a lot of money making a lot of money. Rich people figuring out they know how to do this. And he's sending certain signals. He's pulling the levers behind the scenes, or even right up front, and sending signals out into the market. So the rich people know when to sell and when to buy. And they're riding the roller coaster up and down, making a crap load of money. And who does that cost? Well, it ultimately costs the economy and various industries billions of dollars in efficiency losses, because everything's going up and down like a yo-yo. You can't plan. It affects middle-class people because there's a lot of capital changing hands. And when one group of rich people makes a lot of money and profits just off the pure capitalistic nature of what's going on here, just the trading of capital and no increase in actual economic output, it costs other people who end up losing money in the stock market. And that is, generally speaking, people like us, average middle class, lower middle class, and poor people. And that's the way the economy works. At least when tariffs are being used as the main tool to drive economic change. And the larger point there too is it's not just being used as a tool for economic transformation. It's being used as a tool for a variety of other purposes, cultural change, to just get Donald Trump favors, to make people come to the White House and grovel at his feet in order to get an exemption to a tariff. It puts all the power in his hands. That's why he's using the tariffs. It forces people to go to Mar-a-Lago or to the Oval Office and get down on a knee and say, please, King Trump, may I have a carve out for my industry, for my business? And he has all the oligarchs coming to him now, including those in the tech industry who are making him more powerful than ever with their platforms that at one time were targeted at him, trying to stop him. Google, Facebook, now in the palm of his hand, groveling, begging, please, President Trump, don't regulate us out of existence. Don't force us to break up our companies and split off Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. Don't make us split up our company. We've worked too hard to oligopolize all of this. And you see, that's what it's about. It's, a lot of people don't really understand what's going on because we're all so familiar with Monopoly, the game, right? But this is not the game that's being played now. Monopoly is like a game based on, as I'm sure you all know, dominating the economy, the real estate market, on a board. And how is that done? Well, it's like basically an entrepreneur, like a business person, a sole proprietor, trying to just dominate the whole market and set up a monopoly, which is take over everything. One guy with one business, you end up with all the money, all the properties on the board. You just dominate. You have a monopoly. One guy, one business, his business, owning everything. A singular owner. That's monopoly. Mono, single, one. But what we have here now is an oligarchy. And what Trump is playing is not monopoly. He's playing oligopoly. And that's what they do in Russia. They have an oligarchy there as well. One that really emerged in robust form after the fall of the Soviet Union. And then steps were taken. There was the economic shock therapy, collapsing the economy, allowing these rich people, semi-rich at the time, some of them being minted as brand new oligarchs at the time, being allowed to buy up assets after the crash of the economy there for pennies on the dollar. And then as the value of everything rose back up, they became insanely wealthy. And now you have an oligarchy fully operational within Russia. And Trump is now doing pretty much the same sort of thing here. He's setting up an oligarchy as he plays oligopoly. Olo meaning, a group of or more than one, many. a group of business people. And this is also on the geopolitical landscape, what is going on. It is like, it's a struggle. And this was what was really present in the election as well. You know, if you really stand back and look at it, it's more of like it's not a right versus left thing only. It's not fascism versus communism or liberalism versus conservatism. It was, and continues to be a struggle for transformational change between corporatists who are the CEOs and the people who control these big multinational corporations, which has been sort of the emergent economic force within Western society since certainly World War II, and even before to some degree, but afterward, corporatism really taking root and taking hold and expanding across Western economies and becoming the dominant force, and not just straight up capitalism, corporatism over time, because it wasn't just a single proprietor like in monopoly. It became big corporations propped up by all of us with our investments in those companies through asset management companies quite often. And I know I don't want to get down and want to talk about it. I'm not going to say the names of the companies because it will trigger people. But it's our money in those companies that has lifted up our society largely, and pension funds, retirement funds, mutual funds, T-bills. It goes on and on. Corporatism, the corporatocracy, the big corporations sort of dominating the economy. And over time, as corporatism became bigger and more widespread and more dominant within the economy, small businesses came under more and more and more pressure. And that's why mom and pop stores started to go out of business more. Even variety stores or convenience stores here, you know, it would be like Joe's Variety over there and Sally's Variety Store over on that corner. But even now, when you drive around in my hometown, a sort of a medium-sized city here in Canada, and you drive down the street, you might see a few mom and pop variety stores, but on the major corners, it's 7-Eleven. It's 7-Eleven. It's Circle K. And the same in the United States. You have big chains owned by big corporations owning and dominating entire markets. Retail, much the same thing. And over time, even the corporate stores like Hudson Bay Company in Canada, I mean, over time, they just stop being able to compete because they're still not big enough. And then bigger operations like Walmart come into play, and they swallow up or put out of business competing stores. And you've got more and more and more consolidation of power in all kinds of industries. And it's done on a global scale as well. So I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know, or at least even just instinctively, you could just see it intuitively, you know, just by looking around, you can see what's going on. And I don't think but strangely enough, the man who is behind, or at least is leading the charge, or the face of this transformational economic, social, cultural, geopolitical change in the United States and around the world, the leader of the world, ironically, Donald Trump, this guy, he doesn't really seem to completely grasp what he himself has become the facilitator of, the guy who's driving all of this. Because on Truth Social tonight, he's tweeting this about Walmart. He's saying that Walmart, which is now warning the United States and, well, U.S. consumers that, well, he's not issuing the warning, but Walmart is issuing a warning, warning consumers that their prices are going to rise as well, just like Loblaw and a lot of these big retail chains in Canada are warning consumers now. Prices are just days away, or they're already here, and you're going to see even more of them is the same thing from Walmart over in the US. But Donald Trump's response to Walmart is also telling. It's pretty clear that he is just economically incompetent, which you wouldn't think, given that he has a lot of money. But what I've learned about really, really, really rich people is sometimes they're completely out of touch. They can't do much of anything for themselves. They live in a completely different world. They just have other people do things for them. So they just hire smart people to do what needs to be done in order to make sure that they're taken care of. And I think largely that's what Donald Trump does right across the board, including with his financial assets, because he clearly doesn't understand macroeconomics. I don't know about the micro side of things, but he doesn't understand tariffs, even though he's the one using them, because he's telling Walmart that they got to eat it. They got to eat the tariffs, as you see in this headline. Walmart's CEO today saying that price increases that people are seeing on store shelves are the result of tariffs being, in his words, too high, particularly when it comes to Chinese goods. Quote, Walmart CEO Douglas McMillan says, "We will do our best to keep our prices as low as possible. But given the magnitude of the tariffs, even at the reduced levels announced of this week, we aren't able to absorb all the pressure, given the reality of narrow retail margins." And then Trump responds with this on Truth Social. He either doesn't know, doesn't care, whatever, or he's just trying to shift the blame, deflect. And this is what he says here. He says, Walmart should stop, all caps, trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices throughout the chain. Walmart made, all caps again, billions of dollars last year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, again, all caps, in quotation marks, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything, all caps. I'll be watching, and so will your customers, 3 exclamation points. And then there's somebody below that making excuses for Trump, who's shifting the blame to Walmart. No, they just want the USAID money back. That's all it is. You see, people who are telling you that this side's going to win or that side's going to win in this tariff war, those are the people really that you shouldn't pay too much attention to, because it isn't really about winning or losing. Because in a trade war like this, where tariffs are concerned, nobody actually wins. Everybody really ends up losing, no matter what happens, because of exactly what we're seeing. Prices rise on both sides. Efficiencies decline, because as the countries involved in the tariff war proceed with the war, it forces, through economic forces, the walling off of your economies so that you bring more of your production inward instead of maximizing efficiency by essentially delegating or even outsourcing production of certain things to people or countries, factories, whatever, in other areas where you can enjoy more efficiencies. Therefore, lowering the costs of production, getting more affordable goods, raising the standard of living for everyone who then ends up purchasing those goods and or services or related products in the countries that those goods are exported to. So if everybody focuses on the things that they're best at, most efficient at, and produces those goods, and then we trade back and forth, everybody wins, because you get more economies of scale, access to bigger markets across the board, providing better economies of scale, more efficiencies, and lower production costs overall. And you get maximum benefit on all sides for all parties involved in trading. And that's what the expansion of the world economy largely has been about, and even globalized trade. And we've seen massive efficiencies and even quality improvements on things like automobiles over the past, say, 30, 40 years in particular. The quality of automobiles increased a lot compared to, say, what it was in the 1970s. And that's because of international competition from Japan. And while there has been a lot of pain over the years because production was outsourced, and I'm not saying I agree with everything that happened in the auto industry. I'm just saying that over time, these things have evolved into a much more efficient world economy. There are other issues that you have to consider, national security issues, cultural issues. For instance, if you have, a unique culture and unique languages and unique customs, and you need to provide even, I guess, coverage of community events for news, in like a small town someplace way in northern Canada, you need to try to sometimes provide some level of protection for industries where economic efficiency alone is not the sole consideration. Sometimes there are other things that you need to consider for the greater good of your society. So I totally get those arguments as well. But that's what ultimately the trade deals are about. That's what they're for. The USMCA to be renegotiated, and it will happen. And I think that's coming. I'm not sure what month they're supposed to start that, but I think over the summer. Don't quote me on that. But it's coming soon. And once we get to that, maybe the trade deal that Trump said was the best trade deal, replacing the worst trade deal ever, NAFTA, and then USMCA became the best trade deal ever, that is now being characterized by him as like one of the worst trade deals ever, will now be renegotiated into what he will no doubt, when all is said and done, come back and tell us is the best trade deal ever again. So stay tuned for that, because until we get to it, the roller coaster ride will continue. And we'll be right back after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, so where should we go from here? I guess since we're talking about the economy, I'll get into this thing with Mark Carney and his no budget. I didn't comment too much on it the other night, but I did give you my assessment when it came to light that he's not going to table a budget right now. Not to say that the government can't function. And then this, of course, has sparked a lot of criticism, of course, from the opposition parties, including Pierre Poilievre, who may end up back in the House of Commons and leader of the Conservatives again. We'll see. A lot of criticism saying that this just shows he doesn't really have a plan, et cetera, et cetera. And the Canadians deserve to have a full budget so that we can understand where the economy is going and exactly what they're going to do. But there are other considerations here. And I had somebody message me very upset, which is really why this overnight message, this is what has sparked my decision today to discuss this just a little bit more. It's because this person said, Mark Carney is scum, and he's just, what were the exact words? Destroying democracy or something of that nature. And it's not really true. I said a long time ago that this is more, you know, conservatives and Mark Carney all the evidence backs up what I've been saying about Mark Carney, actually, since the election. He's more conservative in many respects than even Pierre Poilievre is when it comes to economic issues. And he's showing it here, has been showing it since the election, since even becoming leader of the Liberal Party and prime minister prior to the election, which is another story. But his approach to things as an economist, and your heads are blowing up right now, I know, but if you look at his actual plan for housing, if you look at what he is doing, his approach is as conservative or more conservative than anything you are ever going to get from Pierre Poilievre on the economy, at least at this point. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. And that is because he's under pressure. There's a change. The political winds of change are blowing. And the political Overton window, as they call it, the political mood in the country has shifted back into more conservative territory, closer back over to the center from where it was on sort of the very far progressive left. And so people want tax cuts. Poilievre campaigning on axe the tax. And whether you care to admit it or not, Carney has responded. He's responding to the public pressure and the political pressure from the opposition to enact more conservative policies, such as right before the election, he cut gas taxes. Oh, it's just a stunt. Yeah, but the prices came down regardless. And regardless of how he did it, we got a tax cut at the pumps, and it has been substantial. Prices have increased a little bit now because it's summer and there's more demand as people go on vacations, and there's just more demand at the moment for gasoline. So with more demand, you get higher prices because of the laws of supply and demand, which you can't get away from. Those are always in effect, regardless of what a government does. So prices up a little bit since then, but still not near the levels they were prior to his carbon tax cut at the pumps. In addition to that, we're seeing as well that he just announced a tax cut for the middle class. And the conservatives honestly don't know what to do with that, because this is one of the reasons they lost the election. Carney came in and took away he took away their key campaign the key plank in their campaign platform, tax cuts. He gave you the tax cut. Poilievre is saying, axe the carbon tax, axe the tax, axe the tax. So Carney axed the tax. Prices at the pump dropped. People went, oh, it's not so bad. He's not such a bad guy. Now we're seeing the same thing. Even though he's being elected, he announced, and I'll take it as a taxpayer. Not that I make any money, but if I ever make any money and I have to pay tax, I'll keep the tax cut. And that's because, again, of the pressure that he has been placed under. So he's a politician. He's pragmatic. He's less liberal than you might think. He's a pragmatist. He's not I don't think he's as ideologically entrenched as the streamers out there who want to characterize him in that way would have you believe. No, he wants to get elected, reelected, stay in power, and that's what he's doing. And what we're getting right now, and your heads are going to blow up when I tell you this. We're getting a master class in how to govern from a very smart guy. And I said this same thing about Trudeau. People were saying that he was abusing the system, that he was a tyrant and a dictator. And I said, no, no. I said, and people were saying he's a tyrant because he's making all these changes. He was also, in many respects, a transformational prime minister. And a lot of the changes I didn't agree with, as I know that you don't either. But it's not because he was a tyrant who was abusing the system. I said it many times. He knows how to use the system. He grew up and immersed in politics from the time he was born until the time he became prime minister. He knows how the system works. He knows who the players are. He knows how the whole game is played. He knows exactly what's going on behind the curtain. So he knows how to use all the tools. That's why he was able to affect so much change so quickly. Mark Carney is much the same. Very smart guy, economist, heavy career in running the banks of Canada and England as governor of both. He knows how the financial systems work intimately, extremely well educated. Policies aside, I'm just saying this is a guy who knows how to govern. And right now we're navigating through a very difficult time in the country because of this pressure from Trump, the tariffs, the threat of, Canada 51, separatism, all of this. And so what does Mark Carney do once he's elected? He says, we're not going to table a budget. Not right now. We're going to delay it. And people say, well, that's just an end run around democracy. No, actually, it isn't. It's not illegal. He's not breaking any rules, not even a single one. Even though people want to keep saying that Mark Carney's corrupt and he's stealing this and he's not doing that and he's breaking these rules, the truth of the matter is he's a rule follower. And that's because he knows how the system works. So he's not abusing the system, he's using the system. And conservatives would do well, if you want to win, to pay attention. All the other political parties should pay attention to what he's doing, because this is a masterclass in how to govern, not to dictate, but how to use the tools in the Canadian democratic parliamentary system, how to use that to govern, not to dictate. That's what he's doing. A lot of people don't like it, but the reason he didn't table the budget is because any budget, and you have to know a little bit about the way the system in Canada works, any budget is always subject to a vote. And the vote that a budget is subject to is always a vote of confidence, because it's a major piece of legislation. And if it is defeated in the House of Commons, then it automatically triggers a confidence vote. If the confidence vote fails, which it likely does if the budget itself fails, if the confidence vote fails, it triggers an election, which is very destabilizing, or can be. It certainly is to the government in power at the time. And since we just came through an election, and Mark Carney has a minority government, there is a possibility that a budget could be defeated if tabled. And that would honestly, frankly, it would not be in the best interests of citizens. It wouldn't be in the best interest of the country at all to go through another election like right now. And so he knows that. And he also wants to govern. So there are tools available to him. There are ways that he can deal with this. And he has every legal right. And the parliamentary system that we have in Canada affords him with the the latitude here to simply not table a full budget right now, and he can continue to run the government without doing that. And so how can he do it? Well, there's parliamentary supply votes and estimates. So the federal government's operations are funded through supply votes in Parliament, which approves spending through the main estimates and supplementary estimates. And these are detailed spending plans submitted to Parliament in regular cycles. Typically, they happen in February, March, and then later in the year, and are legally required to keep the government functioning. Now, unlike a budget, which is a policy document outlining fiscal strategy, the estimates are the mechanism by which Parliament authorizes spending. And the government can operate by securing these votes even without a formal budget. So, for example, in the absence of the 2025 budget, the government will rely on the estimates process to fund departments, agencies, and programs, ensuring continuity of operations. And in cases where Parliament is not sitting, as we had during the prorogation period, the government can use special warrants to access funds for essential operations. And these are temporary measures requiring approval from the Governor General and then must later be ratified by Parliament. So it's not that it's not entirely it's not that it's an end run around democracy. It's just a different set of mechanisms through which the funding to keep government operating can be accessed and distributed properly during that period of what you would say like a transition period. And so even during the 2025 election, we saw that the government under Carney reportedly greenlit like $70 billion in spending via special warrants, a higher amount than in previous elections. But this demonstrates the mechanism's role in maintaining operations. The point that I'm making here is Mark Carney, an economist, someone who understands not just how business works and how banking works, he understands how government works. And this, as I say, is a masterclass on how to govern. The government's focusing on immediate legislative priorities now, such as Ways and Means motion to implement a promised tax cut for the lowest income bracket, reducing the rate from 15% to 14% by July. And this motion will be tabled when Parliament resumes May 26th. And it allows tax changes without requiring a full budget. I'll take the tax cut. Okay, it's only 1% and only for the lower income tax bracket, but it helps the people in the lower income tax bracket. And the Conservatives' heads are blowing up over this. And they're trying to say, well, it's no big deal. It works out to like, I don't know, I saw one estimate where they were saying was like $1.36 a day or something. Not even enough to buy a coffee is what one person sent me in a text, all outraged. But the truth of the matter is, at the end of the year, for someone in this tax bracket, you'll see probably tax savings of about $800 to $1,000 a year. And for a family on a modest income, that's a substantial amount. That could be your family vacation. That could be the difference between struggling each month to just have, a few extra things from the grocery store or not. It's not a lot, but it's something, and I'll take it. And that's happening. And this is the result of democracy, not the end run around democracy. You're getting the tax cut because democracy is in action. You're getting, this is the will of the people essentially playing or putting pressure on Mark Carney. And he's responding to the public pressure so that he doesn't have a revolt on his hands. Give the people a bit of a tax break. And he could be more. But he's also facing uncertainty, and it's the tariffs and who knows what's going on with sovereignty and all of these other issues. So you're getting some relief, economic relief. And as a result, Carney is acting more like a conservative than anyone ever would have expected with tax cuts. And I think you're going to see more to come. And so it's I think there are other reasons why he wouldn't table a budget right now. But really, I think the main one is, and I said this the other night, it's to avoid a confidence vote and possibly the triggering of another election. And honestly, Canada is better off without triggering another election right now. You see, if Carney were to table a budget and it were to be defeated, and then you get an election triggered, and then we go back to the polls, it would be like the shortest sitting government probably in Canadian history. And then you get another election, and what would the result of that election be? You never know, but chances are you'd end up with the same result again. And so it would be an exercise in futility and frustrate people even more, create more instability, cost taxpayers a lot of money, cost us a lot of efficiencies because we have government just campaigning and over and over again as we get into what would potentially become a lengthy cycle of elections. Every time, probably get another minority government. And if it isn't the Liberals, it might be a minority conservative government. And then you're back into the same scenario. And if they file a budget right away, then that could trigger an election. You see, so Carney's reaching for stability at a time when the country is in a very vulnerable position. And that's not to say that it's an end run around democracy, because we're going to get to a budget. And by the fall, you're going to see that a robust, or they're saying there's going to be an extensive fall economic statement released, again, avoiding a potential confidence vote on the economic statement, because it's not a full budget. So he may be able to avoid a confidence vote at that point. But then that gets us into fall, which will carry us over into the winter and into the new year. And then we're supposed to see, very likely, a full budget early next year. So you're going to see a combination of things. And there are a variety of ways using our current system that allow the government to operate in this manner for purposes of proper transition from one government to another, to address issues like instability, external threats to the country. There are a variety of reasons why. And this is not the only time it has been done. We saw some instances of this during the pandemic back in 2020, when a lot of things were shut down, including many aspects of government. In 2011, the budget was delayed due to the federal election. And back then, we had Stephen Harper as prime minister, and he was the one who delayed tabling of the budget. He faced a minority parliament, tabled a budget on March 22nd, 2011, and it was not voted on due to a non-confidence vote, and triggered the federal election on May 2nd, 2011. And that budget included tax cuts, modest spending increases. It was contentious, and a minority parliament and opposition parties at that time seized on that to defeat the government, and we got the election at the time. We got a delayed budget in 1995 due to economic transition. At that time, we had Jean Chrétien as the Liberal government prime minister. It was the budget was delayed in 95 under him until February 27th, 95, later than the usual early year timeline. And this happened because the government was grappling with a financial crisis. It was pretty severe because of a deficit at that time of $42 billion and rising debt to GDP ratios. That had compounded by the 1994 Mexican peso crisis, which raised fears of Canadian debt default. And we had back then, Paul Martin was the Liberal finance minister, and he needed time to craft what they called a transformative budget, which focused on deficit reduction, deep spending cuts, and program reviews. And Martin himself was, in some respects, I don't know, he was very businesslike in his approach to finances, but the delay allowed the government to stabilize economic projections in line with international expectations. And it's all that instability right now, too, that, has been cited by Carney and Canada's new finance minister as reasons for delaying the tabling of a full budget. It's because they don't know what's going to happen with the tariffs and with the 51st state pressures, where we're going to be with our situation with the United States even next month, let alone 6 months from now. And so it's very difficult to budget for anything, even a year from now, when you're not sure what the state of your auto industry is going to be, what energy exports are going to look like, what the politics in the country is going to look like. Or at this point, if half your provinces might separate between now and then, or if you're going to have a revolt on your hands, or who knows what, the country is in a very vulnerable position. And so in that respect, I kind of get it. How do you table a budget when you don't even know where things are going? Not that I want to sit here and make excuses for them, because I would like to see, a higher level of transparency for taxpayers. But ultimately, you're getting that through this process, which is being used to continue the operations of government. And this stuff is still coming before Parliament. But back in 1985, we had a conservative government under Brian Mulroney. They won a majority at that time. They came in following a Liberal government, and their first budget was not tabled until, what was it? So September, November, December, January, March, April, May. So about 7 months beyond when it would normally be tabled. So it was a pretty significant delay, and that happened because at that time, Mulroney needed time to transition from the Liberal administration, assess the fiscal situation at the time. They had a sizable debt, again, coming in because of the Liberals, who had spent a lot of money, $38 billion deficit that year, rather, not debt, and they needed to develop a comprehensive economic agenda focused on tax reform. And they also focused a lot of that time on privatization to enhance efficiencies. And so the election and subsequent parliamentary setup delayed the budget cycle as the government prioritized a November 84 economic summit to outline immediate priorities. So their strategy at the time wasn't really unlike what we're getting right now from Carney. And I would say Mulroney, he also was very masterful in the way he could govern, the way he chose to govern. And he knew how to use the tools of our parliamentary democracy to bring more stability to the country. And he was an instrument of transformative change as well, because if you think, this is also, I think, why at the time the budget was delayed under Mulroney, it's because we had at the time this whole debate over the North American Free Trade Agreement. Again, international trade with the United States. It was transformative. It was controversial. That's what that whole election back then was fought over. That was the focus of the whole election. And the result was that we did get NAFTA. We did get transformative change on the economy. We did see a lot of outsourcing of production from Canada. The economy did change. And jobs were lost. But on the other side, we got more efficiencies, and we got lower consumer prices on a lot of things, and we got more cross-border shopping with this idea in people's minds. And I remember those days, because I'm so old, that people were crossing the border to go cross-border shopping, thinking that when they came back, they were going to be bringing whatever they bought in the United States back and not have to pay any duties or taxes. And that wasn't the case, because under NAFTA, it wasn't about full free trade. It was about a negotiated settlement and what taxes or tariffs essentially would end up being placed on various goods. 2% on that, 7% on that. You'd get there, and you'd have to go into the office at the Canada Border Services office, Customs, and show them all your receipts for all the groceries you buy. I know, because I used to go over with everybody. I used to go over to Detroit all the time and do your cross-border shopping. A lot of people still do it if you live close enough to the border. And you go in and they say, "What'd you buy?" when you get to the border, and you tell them, and then, okay, you bought too much. You go over to secondary, and then they look at your receipts, but it's not tariff-free. And there was no budget back in 1971 because of economic and political uncertainty. You had Pierre Trudeau in power at the time. You had him not tabling a budget in 1971 at all. And it's very rare, but it does happen. It has happened. And it's usually because of some kind of instability that is present at the time, which is also why we got the prorogation and we'll get into, I've been involved. I got into that another night. I don't need to rehash all of that for you. But the alternative or the flip side of that, and then I'll wrap this whole segment up because I've probably gone too long with this tonight, but I share it because to really understand what is going on, and nothing that I'm saying here is really meant to be partisan in any way. It's just a little bit of a history review. It's, I hope, insight into how the system works and illustrates how this isn't about circumventing democracy. It is about using the tools of democracy, yes, to retain power at a time when you were just elected in order to provide, to not dictate, but actually do your job. And that's to govern the country. And so to actually govern, you have to stay in power. And so to make sure that the government remains stable, not just the parliament, but all the bureaucratic institutions that we have in place, all the ministries, so that the Canada Pension Plan remains, administered properly, so that everything that the federal government runs continues to run well, that the military is fully addressed, or whatever, just whatever department. I'm not making statements about any particular department either. I'm just saying that it's the government, the operations, the business of running the government that has to remain stable as well. That's what the actions of Carney are really resulting in right now. On the opposite side of that, all you have to do is go back to my youngling years back in 1979. And I remember this well because I was becoming much more politically aware at that very young, tender age when Joe Clark was elected Conservative prime minister, and he formed a minority government. And I remember living through that. He won, at the time, 136 seats. The election was held in spring of 1979. So he was just short of a majority, 136 seats. At the time, he needed 141 for a majority in the 282-seat House of Commons at the time. And the Liberals had 114 seats. NDP, I remember Ed Broadbent, the leader of the NDP at the time, they had 26. Social Credit Party was present in the House at that time, and they had 6 seats. Social Credit Party. Not there now. See, no, it's just a uniparty. No, there are other options out there. There have always been other options in Canada because we have more of a democracy in Canada than they do in the United States. So anyway, Joe Clark, you're saying Joe who? That's right, because Joe Clark was not masterful when it came to governing. In fact, he earned himself the nickname Joe Who, as I recall. And they would laugh when people would laugh when you say Joe Who. Yeah, it's because he was an ineffective leader. The Liberals had been in power since 1963, except for a very brief minority government in between. And they were, the Conservatives just weren't a powerhouse. They didn't have, especially at that time, a lot of depth in how to govern the country, right? And so it wasn't like even under Diefenbaker, it was better. But with Joe Clark, he came in, and I remember him distinctly saying that even though he had a minority government, he said he was going to govern as though he had a majority. Well, you can't do that. If you do not have a majority government, you need to negotiate everything, and you need to use every tool at your disposal to protect your government so that it is not defeated on motions of confidence. Otherwise, your government falls. And if your government falls, then you're back to the polls. Everything's thrown back into the chaos of an election. And that's what an election is. It's like peaceful war where you have competing political forces going to war without guns, fighting for power within the country. And it can get pretty darn nasty. And so as a result, Joe Clark ended up having one of the shortest lived governments in Canadian history. He was in power for only 259 days. After and then he was defeated on what? A budget. And this is the kicker. Okay, this is why I remember it so well from when I was a kid. I was so young. This is when I really started to take note of politics. He was defeated on the budget because he, in his budget, was trying to push through an 18% gallon, because we're still on the imperial system at the time, 18 cents per gallon gas tax, as well as budget cuts. Not popular. It's a recipe for freaking political disaster. I'm going to tax you more and give you less. And I've got a minority government, and I'm not that popular to begin with. And I've got this powerful liberal machine breathing down my neck. And I've got this minority government in place, and we're not very, adept at governing. Well, guess what, man? Bad news. So the budget was defeated. It triggered an election. The liberals at the time were just over themselves. Like they just were like, get me the smelling salts. We can't afford the tax cut or the tax increase at the pumps. It was the gas tax election. And it was Clark, a conservative, who was proposing an 18-cent per gallon increase. People were livid. So it gets defeated, the budget, and then we go to the polls. This is why I remember it. It's because that was the issue. Liberals came back. Pierre Trudeau won the election, right? Came in, and then the gas tax that they had opposed, they imposed their own gas tax, and it was even higher than the 18 cents that the Conservatives were going to bring in at the time. And I thought, I learned a lesson right there. Because people were voting against the gas tax, and they brought in Trudeau, and they got an even higher gas tax. So people got duped. That's why I remember it. But that's why, see, the country would have been better off at that time had Joe Clark been better at governing. And if he had been better at using the tools of democracy available to him at the time to govern the country and not fail, leave himself vulnerable. So it isn't that Mark Carney is doing anything illegal. It's not that he's breaking any rules. He's not upending democracy. He's using the tools of democracy that are available to him. And, some people won't like it because they just want him gone. They want the liberals out. And I totally get that perspective, if that's your view on it. But on the other hand, maybe we've got something to learn from smart people who know how to get things done. I'll tell you something else too. In a time when the country is facing uncertainty, turmoil, turbulence, everything's disruptive, we don't know what's around the corner. I don't care what their political stripe is, whoever is at the helm, whoever's leading the country at the time, conservative, New Democrat, liberal, whatever, I don't care. I just want whoever's running the country to be successful so that we are all successful. And that would be my position, just regardless of who is currently elected at any given time, so that we all prosper, so that we're all better off. So let's hope that things get better, period. And then when the time comes, we'll have another election and we can take another kick at the can if we're not happy. That's the way the system works, man. And if you want to make change, get involved in the system. Don't just show up and vote once every election. And we have more of them than they do in the United States, not just every 4 years. We could still go to the polls very early. There could be something else that could trigger it, not just the budget issue. But if you want to make change, then get involved in politics. Get involved in your community. Even if you don't get involved in politics, get out and get involved in your community. Make a difference. Make another podcast. Disagree with me. You don't have to say the things I say. Go say the things you want to say. If you think it's going to make a difference. That's how you make change. That's how you make a better country. That's how you make a difference. Not just showing up and voting. Voting's important. Don't get me wrong. It's the critical thing. Because no matter what happens, even if we make a mistake, at the end of the day, that's the thing about voting and our democratic system is despite all the abuse that's been heaped upon it, despite all the corruption, the scandals, the outright theft at times that we've seen from various governments over time, despite all the people who hammer on it every day, crap all over it, when we make a mistake, the system is designed to self-correct, because over time, as we realize we may have made a mistake here, elected a government that's not doing the job properly over there, at the end of the day, the most critical thing is that there's always the vote. So at some point, the people always have that as a last fallback position, no matter what. No matter what. And then if things get really bad, at some point, you can still go to the polls. And I mean, just imagine if things just went completely south, right? What can you do about it? Well, maybe you don't need to rise up and do stupid things. At that point, there'd be so many people upset that all you got to do is go vote. And if you've been involved in politics at all, and you've got some alternative in place politically, you can make change within parties, then you can make a real difference. You can't. I just showed you another party, the Social Credit Party, not even in the House of Commons right now, but they were there at the time. And you can get involved in the parties themselves. And then at the grassroots level, affect policy changes within the parties, which then are carried forward into elections and then ultimately into legislation. Oh, Rick, you're such an idealist. I know. I can't help it.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, so since we're still talking about Carney and he's the new PM, we've seen today that Carney did meet with Volodymyr Zelensky today. Let me bring it up. I'll show you the headline. Here we go. Carney reaffirms Canadian support for Ukraine. First meeting with Zelensky. it is. Carney in Rome says that Canada's steadfast and unwavering support for Ukraine remains in place during his first meeting with Zelensky. And all of this happening as Carney arrives in Rome. I think we've got video of that, actually. Yeah, let's take a little gander, shall we? At Carney doing his presidential style disembark from the plane arriving in Rome. Are we still rolling? Yeah, we are. Okay, sorry, I just got cut there briefly, and I think I'm back on. Are we there? Are we there? Testing 1, 2, 3. I believe we're back in business. I'm sorry about the break in the transmission. Houston, we had a problem, but we're back. All right. Sorry. All right, let's bring up the video of the PM disembarking. There it is. We've got him. His thing. And what was his thing? Well, we've seen that these peace talks regarding Ukraine have hit a wall as the first direct negotiations in over 3 years between Russia and Ukraine have collapsed now in Istanbul. Not surprising to me whatsoever. Probably not to you either. So we know that yesterday we saw these delegations from Kyiv and Moscow. They met in Istanbul's Dolmabahce Palace, facilitated by Turkey's foreign minister. And hopes were low, but the talks proceeded anyway. They lasted about 2 hours. They did not yield any ceasefire agreement, Ukraine proposing, of course, an immediate 30-day ceasefire. Russia, I think, really largely playing games. No real desire for a ceasefire or peace, frankly. The Ukrainian source called Russia's demands detached from reality, citing Moscow's insistence that Ukraine withdraw from 4 regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, parts of which Kyiv still controls. That's the thing. Russia's like, even those places over there where we haven't been able to capture, you have to give up all that too. So Russia's lead negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, said that both sides agreed to exchange 1,000 prisoners, though. It's the largest swap of the war since its beginning. But beyond that, we've seen no further progress. And the Kremlin stance echoes their 2022 demands, including Ukrainian neutrality, which means that they want basically Zelensky replaced with a leader that is sympathetic, to say the least, to Moscow, which is what they had prior, and recognition of occupied territories and the additional territory that they don't control, plus Crimea. And Kyiv rejects that in these negotiations. They say that amounts to capitulation, basically full surrender. And with Russian forces controlling nearly, I think it's about a fifth of Ukraine at this point, and slowly advancing. We're seeing many analysts saying that Putin may see little need to compromise at this time, and certainly little desire. And the reason is because he can't quit the optics would be very, very bad for him on the home front and could put him in political jeopardy, even though they don't have the same kind of system that we have over here politically. And Ukraine, of course, is continuing to insist on security guarantees and a complete Russian withdrawal. So there's a great big divide between the two sides. But I think Zelensky, frankly, has played this very smart diplomatically through public, in terms of public relations. In this particular case, I think he gained the upper hand, gained a lot of diplomatic ground, because they showed Trump, the Trump administration, mostly, that Ukraine is willing to sit down and talk, as long as, and they're the ones that were proposing an immediate ceasefire, like just stop shooting. Let's do it right now. They've said that repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. And Putin saying, well, we're in favor of a ceasefire, but we need to look at these broader issues. And so it's just a game. It was pretty simple. Just both sides right now, stop. Then we'll sit down and talk peace. And Russia rejected that. We also saw that Putin did not go to Turkey and Trump didn't go to Turkey. But we're also seeing tonight that Trump is going to focus on speaking directly with both, he says, Zelensky and Putin as the new week unfolds. Right here, you can see Trump says he'll speak separately to Zelensky and Putin on Monday about a potential Russia-Ukraine ceasefire. And this is as he's ramping up efforts to help bring a ceasefire to bear here. But so far, he hasn't been directly involved. We'll see what happens Monday. He says, I will be speaking by telephone to President Vladimir Putin of Russia Monday at 10 a.m. Posting on social media, on Truth Social, of course. And he says, I will then be speaking to President Zelensky of Ukraine. And, of course, his promise to bring the dispute, the war, to an end in 24 hours, or maybe even before he takes office, have simply not come to pass. He says that he will be to speak to Putin about, quote, stopping the bloodbath that is killing on average more than 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week, and trade. And he says, hopefully it will be a productive day. A ceasefire will take place, and this very violent war, a war that should have never happened, will end, he added. Well, I'm not holding my breath. Zelensky, Ukraine, hoping that they will receive ongoing support from the United States as the war continues. And they've gone through this, I would say, diplomatic theater in Turkey. I don't think that they were bona fide peace talks or did negotiations aimed at a ceasefire, because I don't think that Russia was interested in that at all, which is why they basically sent lower level diplomats in to deal with the entire thing. So overall, just a bad situation. Now, I know a lot of you want me to talk about the ostriches. I'm not going to get too deep into that tonight. I might talk about it in more depth tomorrow. I have been kind of monitoring what's been going on with it. But honestly, from what I'm seeing at this point, there really aren't that many new developments. I know that, people are being encouraged to go to that place. And I'm seeing some strange messaging and strange social media posts that have me kind of scratching my head as well. There's talk tonight about another possible court intervention paperwork or some sort of court challenge being filed at the federal level to try to get a further delay on the cull of these 400 ostriches at Universal Ostrich Farm. And I think there's some internal politics involved in that. But more than that, it's just so, I'm kind of a lone voice in bringing you the factual information regarding what has really been going on out of that farm, which surprised me as I started to look at it. I have no axe to grind with anybody, and I'm not even really being critical. I've just been giving you the straight up information, which has been pretty weird, frankly, about the injections that the birds were being given, the experimentation that was being done on them, the way in which the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, I think, even became aware of the bird flu outbreak that was present on the farm, the politics surrounding the whole thing. And when you stand back and you look at it from an aerial view, there's so much theater here. And you can see exactly where it's going, and you can see that there's a lot more going on here than just the birds. You've got a political movement latched onto a narrative. And one of the leaders within the freedom movement tonight, I'm aware, I'm not going to direct you to any of this stuff. You can go find whatever you want to find. But strange messaging regarding this possible lawsuit, legal challenge to delay, because there's also a warning in there about people, and not coming from me, coming from him. If you listen to him carefully, he's warning people. You show up there, you're going to get arrested. And the question is, why is that messaging coming forward? And it's the way that it's framed as well. There's internal politics being played. You can smell it, and I'm not privy to know the exact reasons why, but you can see it if you really start to peel back some layers. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that for tonight. Because at the same time, as we've seen this stuff play out over the past couple of years, multiple times in various locations, with like that camp outside of Ottawa that was set up for a while. And you saw the protesters there, and they camped out all summer and caused a lot of commotion. And then at the end of it all, what ended up happening? The farm where they were staying, where they were living basically rent-free for a summer, they ran up a big hydro bill, stuck the owner with it, who couldn't afford to pay it, left a big mess behind, and a fundraiser had to be held so that the farm owner, who was not physically or not well health-wise, could be assisted in cleaning up his property and paying off the big electricity bill that had been run up. I remember there was a fundraiser that had to be held. And the entire time I'm watching that, and I thought, this is just bizarre. And then in the end, it wasn't cool what was going on to begin with, and it certainly wasn't cool with the way that things ended. And in the end, nothing was accomplished. What's going on out here seems to be of a much larger scale. But again, it's sort of like that time of year where it's time to set up a camp someplace. And there's more to it than just that, I'm aware. But this seems to be the focal point for this summer's big protest. And the biobirds, the Frankenbirds are being portrayed as all natural, holistic, humanized caricatures of ostriches with names on a farm where they're now being portrayed as pets. And I guess you have to save them so that they can get back to injecting them for virus research again. Anyway, weird. The whole thing is just weird. But people don't want me talking about it. So, but I might talk about it more tomorrow. I just don't want to give them too much attention. unless it's actually warranted. If it's actually news, I will report. But between now and then, it's pushed back to the last story of the day, and we will revisit it as necessary when warranted, when journalistic standards and the weight of the story itself dictates. What can I leave you with here tonight to just kind of cheer you up? I don't know. I got an idea. Let's go here. Am I missing any important news? Here's let's do a little Twitter scroll, and we're going to get some funny birds, since everybody wants to talk about their ostriches. I have no idea what we're going to get doing this, but I'll bet you we'll find something that'll cheer us up. I used to have pet pigeons. They were pets when I was a kid, and I also had a pet budgie, which could talk, pretty clearly. It could say quite a few words, which was pretty cool. It could whistle tunes too, because it would mimic sounds, right? And I would spend hours and hours training my budgie when I was a kid. And what I did to train my budgie, in case you have one, I made a recording, a long, long, long recording, saying words over and over again, to the point where it's enough to drive you crazy. Like, you would sit there and say, pretty bird, pretty bird. I would repeat that for like a half an hour on a cassette tape, and then it'd be recorded. Then I'd leave the cassette recorder by the cage and leave the room as it played back for half an hour. And I'd do half-hour intervals, and the bird learned how to say that, along with a bunch of other words. That's how I did it. But I couldn't stay in the room, listen to myself say that over and over again. It was pretty cool. That bird would fly around the room, and then come and land on my dad's glasses and sit right there. And then they'd watch TV together. Here's first up on the Twitter scroll from the fabulous Weird Trotters. This is the lyrebird from Australia. It can mimic virtually any sound that it hears, including children's toy chainsaws. Shall we listen in? Sounds more like a laser blaster or something. That's pretty cool. I got to say, though, as much as that's cool to listen to and watch here tonight, I'm not sure I'd want to live with that thing in my house because after a while, that would definitely drive me crazy. How about you guys? Yeah, pretty amazing, eh? Sounds like an old video game. Yeah. Dragon says, yeah, Atari. It does sound like a video game. Yeah. Very cool. Jubilee says, bye, bye, birdie, bye, flock off now. Yeah, and that's my sign too, to sign off for the night. Thanks for hanging out here, everybody. Really appreciate it. As always, you spending your time here with me and all of us being together as we continue to navigate our way through information that gets us closer to the truth. We are the program, the antivirus program for your mind. See y'all back here tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. And what am I going to leave you with tonight? Well, since we were talking about inflation, tariffs, grocery prices, I'll leave you with Midnight Grocery Run. Maverick and the News Brothers. See you back here tomorrow on the flip side.
Under neon lights after 24/7. Cereal boxes stacked like they're from heaven. Cartwheels squeak while hearts untucked. Past the pickles and we're straight up struck. Midnight grocery run, feeling so divine. Bananas in the basket and we're losing track of time. Laughing through the aisles with you right by my side. This midnight grocery run's a wild ride. Frozen pizzas and a chocolate pie. Scanning items neath the starry sky. Fluorescent glow makes everything so real. In this wonderland we break the seal. Midnight grocery run, feeling so divine. Bananas in the basket and we're losing track of time. Laughing through the aisles with you right by my side. This midnight grocery run's a wild ride. Here's certain they know the drill. Moonlit moments give a midnight thrill. We dance down our four like no one sees. Just some dreamers lost in fantasies. Midnight grocery run, feeling so divine. Bananas in the basket and we're losing track of time. Laughing through the aisles with you right by my side. This midnight grocery run's a wild ride.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.